allies and partners, 300 new paramilitary trainers and mentors for NATO training missions in Afghanistan, 70 NATO-embedded training teams to support expansion of the Afghan National Army, a $100 million down payment on the Afghan National Army Trust Fund, and a civilian assistance of $500 million. That was at a summit that was designed to discuss strategy as opposed to attract pledges. And I think it's an indication of the fact that this alliance is committed to achieving the focused goals that we've set out in Afghanistan. I think that you're not going to see a division between allies in terms of how we approach the situation. I think our allies are encouraged by not only the consultation that we conducted prior to releasing our strategy, but also our commitment to continually reviewing the strategy to ensure that it works. And what we anticipate is not only that we will see additional resources brought to bear on the strategy, but that also we will have established a baseline of honesty and clarity about our purpose, so that it will be much more difficult for each of us in NATO to try to avoid or shirk the serious responsibilities that are involved in accomplishing our mission. Okay? Peter Mayer, CBS. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got a two-parter on this policy. I'm wondering if at any time in the course of the meeting or before you asked for a commitment from NATO for combat troops in a war stance like the ones already there and the thousands of others that you're ordering. And since you keep referring to this, and you have referred to it as an Afghanistan and Pakistan policy, and you said recently that you don't envision sending NATO troops being sent to Pakistan. Right. What is the message to Pakistan and the terrorists who are hiding out there?
Well, as I said, this was not a pledging conference. All the NATO allies have troops on the ground who are in harm's way. Our ISAF partners have troops on the ground in harm's way. They are making significant commitments despite having participated in what has turned out to be a very lengthy operation. And so, the whole point of the strategy was to get beyond this notion that somehow there's one kind of troop and one kind of way of accomplishing our mission in Afghanistan. The trainers that we're sending in are no less important than those who are in the South in direct combat with the Taliban, because if we can't achieve these other goals, then we will put more and more of a burden, an unsustainable burden, on those troops that are conducting direct combat operations. So the answer is, number one, all these allies have combat troops on the ground. Number two, part of our strategy is to make sure that we've got a much more comprehensive approach. With respect to Pakistan, we want to bring all of our diplomatic and development skills to bear on strengthening Pakistan, in part because they have to have the capacity to take on al-Qaeda within their borders, but also because to the extent that we strengthen Pakistan's ability to deliver goods and services and a better life for its people, then the less the contagion of extremism in that country or in the region is likely to spread. And I informed our allies here today that we are going to, despite difficult budget circumstances, put more money into aid to Pakistan, conditioned on some concrete results in dealing with the terrorist threat, and we are going to be pushing our allies to participate, for example, in the donors forum for Pakistan that's going to be taking place. We are going to keep on going until we get this job done. And they should be clear that we are unified, we are strong. They will not wear us down. We are going to complete our mission so that our people are safe. Okay. Major?
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon. I'd like to ask you about a law that's recently been passed in Afghanistan that affects the 10% of the Shia population there. A summary of it says it negates the need for sexual consent between married couples, tacitly approves child marriage, and restricts a woman's right to leave the home. The United Nations Development Fund for Women says this legalizes the rape of a wife by her husband. I'd like your assessment of this law, number one. Number two, will you condition future troop movements of the U.S. to Afghanistan on the basis of this law being redrafted or rewritten? And if not, sir, what about the character of this law ought to motivate U.S. forces to fight and possibly die in Afghanistan?
Well, first of all, this was actually a topic of conversation among all the allies. And in our communique, you will see that we specifically state that part of this comprehensive approach is encouraging the respect of human rights. I think this law is abhorrent. Certainly, the views of the administration have been and will be communicated to the Karzai government. And we think that it is very important for us to be sensitive to local culture, but we also think that there are certain basic principles that all nations should uphold. And respect for women and respect for their freedom and integrity is an important principle. Now, I just want to remind people, though, why our troops are fighting. Because I think the notion that you laid out, Major, was that our troops might be less motivated. Our troops are highly motivated to protect the United States, just as troops from NATO are highly motivated to protect their own individual countries and NATO allies collectively. So we want to do everything we can to encourage and promote rule of law, human rights, the education of women and girls in Afghanistan, economic development, infrastructure development. But I also want people to understand that the first reason we are there is to root out Al-Qaeda so that they cannot attack members of the alliance. Now, those two things aren't contradictory. I think they're complementary, and that's what's reflected in the communique. We have stated very clearly that we object to this law, but I want everybody to understand that our focus is to defeat Al-Qaeda and ensure that they do not have safe havens from which they can launch attacks against the alliance. Ed Luce from the Financial Times. Where's Ed? There he is.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the context of all the multilateral activity that's been going on this week, the G20 here at NATO, and your evident enthusiasm for multilateral frameworks, to work through multilateral frameworks, could I ask you whether you subscribe, as many of your predecessors have, to the school of American exceptionalism that sees America as uniquely qualified to lead the world? Or do you have a slightly different philosophy? And if so, would you be able to elaborate on it?
I believe in American exceptionalism, just as I suspect that the Brits believe in British exceptionalism and the Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism. I am enormously proud of my country and its role and history in the world. Now, if you think about the site of this summit and what it means, I don't think America should be embarrassed to see evidence of the sacrifices of our troops, the enormous amount of resources